We have been taught to think that learning languages more slowly is a really bad thing. We see in other content, others telling how they learned a language in 7 days, 1 month, and we can easily assume that if we do the exact same things as them, if we learn as fast as them, then we can just have fluency forever and kind of just set it and forget it sometimes. That our proficiency level will then never go down. It's also easy to assume that learning fast will be a given because we've unlocked some kind of magic key to fluency that'll work for absolutely every single language. But here's actually why we can't learn languages fast forever. The truth is, your learning, as well as the whole human you are behind your languages, will keep on evolving. Those aka fast methods that you might have encountered or you feel are just your magic answer to everything in your language learning, I guarantee that they will not work for absolutely every single proficiency level in your language. They will not work for absolutely every single language you encounter in your journey, and they will not work for absolutely every single life circumstance that you will find yourself in. Outside life will always affect our language learning journey, and it can kind of throw us for a loop sometimes when we have to adjust to that. And even though we might learn certain skills or certain concepts faster in a language, right? It's not sustainable. Neither is it sustainable to sustain the speed of learning in general. We also can't always sustain our proficiency level in all 4 skills in all the ways, right? And that's just because we're human and because we have full lives outside of learning our languages. So learning slow can sometimes feel like it's getting in the way short term. Also depends on how you define the word learning, right? But I want to explain to you more why learning more slowly in the long term is actually going to get you way further in your long-term language learning success and confidence. So what exactly are the benefits of taking your time with language learning? Well, you get to have more time to discover how you learn best. Right? You have more flexibility to learn how you want. I think we've all faced the feeling of wanting to copy exactly how others are studying because we've seen them get great results and we think that we're going to automatically fail if we don't apply every step from their learning into our own learning, right? We start to think that there's only one way to learn, and we start to really outsource our intuition that way. And then it kind of becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy because we want to learn the way that other language learners are in order to learn faster. But then we start to learn slower because the methods that they're using to learn fast don't exactly always work for us and for our life circumstances when we apply it to our learning. So we actually learn slower than if we were to just listen to ourselves first and make sure that our learning fits us, not someone else. And when we're really caught up in trying to learn really fast, we don't ever slow down first to allow ourselves the opportunity to investigate, how do I learn best outside of anyone else's expectations, outside of whatever anyone else is doing? We don't trust ourselves to be able to slow down. And then when we inevitably have to slow down, we think that we are going backwards and that we're losing all our progress in our language learning when actually that's part of the natural process. As I said before, with not being able to try to sustain fast learning. For example, I thought that I had to have a textbook that showed me everything, right? Like it had to be a textbook for me to learn for Arabic because I saw a lot of people, use really helpful textbooks in maybe German or Italian. But because I was so distracted by what other people were doing, I didn't take into account that maybe for Arabic, which is definitely more different than my native language English compared to, right, German or Italian, I needed a different approach to how I chose resources. And a textbook for me with this language wouldn't be the best pick for me right now, even though maybe for another person in another language, textbook learning would be perfect. And therefore, I learned a lot slower with Arabic because I didn't slow down to speed up, right? In other words, I didn't slow down and really think about my own process and what I needed, right? What my own life circumstances were demanding from me to make language learning of Arabic more sustainable in the long term and more strategic. And of course, I stopped enjoying the learning process because of that when I could have avoided it. And as I have reiterated in this video before, right, learning languages more slowly, at a more steady pace, at our own rhythm, is a lot more sustainable. I will be the first to tell you, after what I experienced this year, participating in both language schools for 3.5 hours a day, plus a lot of homework, up to 2 or 3 hours additional work outside of class. Majority of language learners would agree, you're in an immersive environment, you're going to class consistently 5 times a week, you have a host family that you can always talk with, you're immersed in the country. This is the most efficient method that you could ever do, and it's something, like it's my dream as a language learner to be able to do what you have done this year. I understand that, and at the same time, even though I was using these most efficient methods according to a lot of learners, I know that for me, it is not sustainable. And personally, I don't ever want to do something like this for 3.5 months ever again. I think my limit is actually 1 month because again, the fast pace is incredibly exhausting. Guys, I had to severely redo how I was filming this. So excuse me for the jump scare, maybe, of this whole new space behind me. And apologies as well, because I had to keep the window open, so you might hear some stuff, the neighborhood rooster in the background, etc. But now that I'm filming this on a different day, it gave me more time to think about what I wanted to add to what I have already explained in the first half. And it's really all about the way that we learn, quote unquote, fast is doing what works for us. And that means learning sustainably, essentially, and not force yourself into a routine or strategies that don't fit your brain, that don't fit your life, nor your hobbies, nor your obligations. By the way, I have a really exciting announcement. If you are looking to still build and maintain consistency in your learning, even though you are busy and you have a lot of life obligations and hobbies, as I said, Multilingual Joys might actually be for you. You can read the full details about what that actually is and also get a free sample of what you can expect inside in the comments below. We also really discount how important even like 5 to 15 minutes of reflection every 2 weeks, every month, even if we're too busy for every 2 weeks, can be for our language learning. And it's in the sustainable seasons that I focus on making my routine most adaptable, most fun, most engaging for my other life obligations that are taking away a lot of my energy, that I can also understand more how I learn best by reflecting on my process and like zooming out, stopping the tunnel vision that we can sometimes get when we are laser focused on getting this one really specific result in our learning, right? We want to improve our speaking, or we're trying to concentrate on everything and we get overwhelmed, like trying to balance multiple languages. It's really been in the sustainable seasons, not the quote unquote fast progress seasons, that I've been able to understand how I learn best long term over all of my language learning life. And all of those really tiny reflections accumulate so that they can really lead you to, AKA like learning faster. In other words, learning more sustainably for long term. And I would say maybe from the outside, it's like, sorry you guys, this is like totally unscripted because I still have a lot of thoughts about this, so be patient with me. I think with me, for example, being able to learn Portuguese this year, let's say, when I have already learned Spanish, when I've already learned Italian and had some French in high school, it's been really valuable for me to be able to reflect on my process after learning, those Romance languages before starting with Portuguese, because now I know already, fundamentally, how do I start a language and learn best? What is my system for creating that? Now you can also check out my other video of how I set up my system to learn any language up until B1 in 3 months. That title might be a bit against what I'm talking about here. It might sound like I'm a hypocrite in some senses with titles like that on my channel. But really, once I got to this point of being able to reflect and see, this is going to be the best thing for me to start in my system for any new language, then even the concept of learning something fast itself, learning Portuguese fast or whatever, has actually become very irrelevant to what language learning means for me, and what it means for making progress. AKA, I really don't see the rate of me learning a language fast as adding anything valuable to my language learning journey. Maybe it adds something valuable to my content that I can share here with you guys, but I want to make it clear anytime that I do post those videos that do have those kinds of titles, right? It is an attention economy on one side, being a creator, especially in the language learning niche where you're like, I don't know where I can trust anyone because they all promise these different things of, learning fast, and it just doesn't seem to work, right? And the concept just of this channel to get the people that might have clicked on me for those kinds of titles, but they stayed for this actual content where I really want to give the substance of what language learning is and remind all of us that learning fast is really to our overall success, aka our own fulfillment and joy and living through our language, learning fast is not a requirement for that. Like, it can be totally irrelevant for what we are doing. That can, of course, differ if we are trying to learn a language for a job, etc. But overall, it all comes down to this is our life, and even if we have an obligation to learn that language for a job or life or something really stressful, maybe having to immigrate to another country with a completely different language, it all comes down to how can I fit this into being a part of my life? It all comes back to sustainability. So I guess I started off this video with saying that you can't learn fast. Now I'm going off of course, my personal definition of what it means for me to learn fast based off my own experience, aka like reaching a B2, a C1 in a really small amount of time. And I want us to think even bigger than that. I want you to think even bigger than that when moving forward with your language learning and thinking about your own goals and how this language, this purpose you have for that language or multiple languages, really fits into your life. Because at the end of the day, we are with ourselves, we are with our language. We're not with anyone else whose expectations may have influenced what we think we should do in our language in order to, like, quote unquote, learn faster, right? It's really not the point of language learning in the end. I know that when we feel a really big level of uncertainty and when we don't believe actually that we can get to fluency sometimes because what we're doing is really hard, we have to remember that, then seeing that sort of promise, in a sense, is really comforting to us. But it leads us to what we actually want, which is that enjoyability and being more of ourselves, showing up as more of us in our languages. I think too, the idea of learning fast too, quote unquote, is the fact of me, for example, being able to learn Spanish, get conversational in about 4 months, and being able to then last year pass the C1 exam for DELE, for Spanish in general. And seeing now that what I was able to do even a year ago for passing that exam, I would not be able to reproduce right now because I haven't touched Spanish seriously or really even listened to a lot of it passively in about a year. And that is also the reality, right? Because reiterating the fact that learning never stops. So if we think we can learn fast, it is totally just outside of the point of why we're learning languages in the first place anyways, ultimately. Anytime that I get any sort of certificate, anytime any human being gets any sort of, milestone that they reach in their language, if they have to put it to the side in order to make that learning process more sustainable for them, then that means that they are also going to drop down a level. I'm probably back at a comfortable like B2 in Spanish. I could work it back up to C1 or C2 if I wanted to, but being able to do something versus should you do something according to your other competing priorities in your life, that is a question that only you can truly answer, right? I always believe that language learners are their best language learning coaches. Even though I do love to coach language learners myself, it is to truly show them how they can be and continue to be their own best teacher, their own best coach, and realize that within themselves. That's what it's all about, because only you know the best way to learn fast, aka how to make your language learning sustainable for you. Outside of just the basics of learning what the best practices are for fundamentally learning any language. How do we also integrate peace and relaxation, a break, into our language studies? Because as I said before, we do have to have breaks. If that means you have to take a break for a day, a month, a few years away from language learning or a specific language, then that is part of learning what is most sustainable for you, right? And to make learning fast just completely irrelevant from your journey at some point, right? And really leaning more into what makes you fulfilled. I can assure you learning fast is not going to take precedence over how that language actually makes you feel in the moment, with the connection that you are forming in the moment with a piece of media or a piece of literature or talking with someone else in person in that language, and being able to step back and take a rest strategically and understand that even according to the National Institute of Health, who did a study on this recently, what that restorative rest really helps your brain do and really helps it solidify and process all that you have trying to cram sometimes into it in order to quote unquote learn a language faster. Again, I do coach language learners on this and how to ultimately master any language on their own terms. So do go back into the comments as well if you are interested in potentially working together, seeing if we would be a good fit, and having a discovery call. Thanks you guys for watching. Make sure to like, make sure to subscribe, because believe it or not, it does help the algorithm to reach more language learners like you. And we'll see each other in another video.